Hello, everyone, and today I would like to give a warm welcome to a leading world bilingualism expert who has had over 30 years research experience in the fields of bilingualism and linguistics. She's also the author of many books, and today we're going to look at and talk about one book in particular, which is Raising a Bilingual Child. And I'm very proud and delighted to introduce you to Professor Barbara Zurer Pearson. Welcome, Professor Pearson.
My pleasure.
Welcome. Right, so today I have lots of questions to ask you regarding your book, regarding your passion for bilingualism and linguistics in general. Inglese Bimbi, in Inglese Bimbi project, which is my project, I try and help out Italian parents who have the desire to integrate English in their daily lives. So they try to raise their children as bilinguals, Italian and English. First of all, regarding your book, which is a step-by-step guide for parents, I have a few questions, obviously. Where does your interest for bilingualism, where does it stem from? Where does it come from? I'm really curious to know this.
Well, I was one of those kids that grew up being fascinated by other languages, but I didn't. And I took Latin, which and um, and French, and then but I got to be. I had my junior year in France. It was a kind of a, and it was like dying and going to heaven. It was just beautiful. And I got to be, and I talk about that in the beginning of the book about how it was such a different an experience for me personally. And then when I came back, I knew I wanted to not be a French teacher, so I got into linguistics and gravitated toward by child first language acquisition and then bilingual acquisition. You had asked me earlier how did I decide to write the book?
That's
And
right.
right. And one of the questions that people ask me all the time is, did I raise my children bilingually? And the answer is, I didn't have my book. So I was in Miami. I thought it was going to happen just naturally.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize that I actually had to do something.
That you were in control of this.
Well, I had to engineer it a little
Mm.
way. I had to be the puppet master or whatever. I had to engineer it, the opportunity, and I had to do something, and that's my biggest takeaway. So if somebody only listens for 3 minutes and they hear this, the biggest thing that the parents have to do is make the child want to learn the two languages.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
it can't be just for the parent. That will take you some ways, and it's a good way to get started. But
Mhm.
at some point, it has to be the child's desire. So I think, well, that's what children need is they need motive and opportunity, right? Or opportunity and motive. Of the two, you need them both, but opportunity is putting them in a situation where it makes sense for them to learn another language. But that's like leading the horse to water,
Mhm.
but you can't make him or her drink. So the biggest and hardest part and the most important is to make it the child's desire. And I really didn't understand until after I'd read the book and I'd been talking to people all over the world who have gotten in touch with me about it. Um, it's more than just motivation, it's identity. And I heard you when you were talking about your upbringing that you
Yes.
identified with it and you identified with it's like for the child to have a sense of him or herself as I'm a bilingual. I
Mhm.
speak languages. First of all, I'm pretty terrific because I do that.
That's
Right?
right.
And I
Absolutely.
have some really good opportunities. I have this friend and this cousin and so forth that I can talk to, or my nonno or whatever, or speaks Italian and I don't, right? And so she has to have really good reasons, but mostly it's a sense that this is me. This is what I do. I am a bilingual person. That I like this person over here and I love to play with this person, but, not a bilingual.
Of
Doesn't have the
course.
same advantage that I have, right?
No, no, no.
One of the best stories I ever heard was fairly recently, a father who was raising his children trilingually. I actually
I
think that's
see.
a lot of work, but
That's a lot of work indeed.
but he was raising his children trilingually, and they moved from one country to another. Right?
Wow.
And in this second country, it was hard for him to keep the Spanish going
Mm-hmm.
and so they had one room in the house where they spoke only Spanish.
Wow.
And then there was a community language and the language that they used most of the time. And one of the children was in the Spanish room, and he said, "Why do I have to speak Spanish?" And the father just looked at him and said, "Oh, you don't want to be a trilingual anymore? You don't want to learn 3 languages? Oh, I didn't." And the kid said, "Oh, right." And he started going
Exactly.
back speaking Spanish. So now, if you're a parent, don't think that you can just do that.
Exactly. It takes time.
there's going to be a point where that issue will come up, and unless you've laid the groundwork that our friend did, you won't be able to have such an easy thing. Um, once one Swiss woman, I think I talk about in the book, where her son said, "Why do I have to talk French with you? I don't talk French with anybody else." She said, "Well, it's such a special thing we have between us. I love talking French with you. It makes me feel so special about you and about my family and so forth." End of conversation. No
That
more.
was enough. That was enough to
But
trigger
not.
a response in
But
French.
usually you have to work at it harder. And so we can get back to that later after you ask something else. But I think you
Of,
asked me why I decided to write the book. I was very, very lucky. I didn't actually. I got invited to write the book.
I see.
And then there was an editor at Random House, the big
Hmm.
publisher, who was herself bilingual. And she had kids who were teenagers who were not too thrilled to be bilingual. And she realized that there was a lot of stuff for schooling, but there was nothing for parents. And so she looked around for somebody to do it. And when she asked me, I was like, why didn't I think of that?
It's such a
And
clever
in fact,
idea.
yeah. And it was other people were thinking of it. So there was kind of a dearth of books. And now all of a sudden there's a ton of books. But um, my colleagues still tell me, even now, all these years later, they say, your book is the most, you know, is the most, has the most science without being intrusive, right?
I completely
But
agree. Science and practical advice.
they still say, how did you get all that stuff in that I always want to tell people?
I never get tired, and every time I reread it, I get new insights. So it really is a special, special book. It's a classic, I think.
Well, I wish.
um, Also mentioning your book, the psycholinguist Annick de Hoover, and excuse me if it's not the right pronunciation, who is from Belgium. Following what you were saying, she says that the best predictors of whether a child will learn 2 languages are that their parents must have a positive attitude, okay, and an impact belief. So a belief that their own language practices have an impact on the child's learning. Okay, so the role as parents can ensure the quality and quantity of your child's exposure. So parents must want this to happen. It's a bit what you were saying before. You've got to want it. It's not enough
So
to
the
be
parent, it has to be, yeah, it has to be important for the parent, but the parent's job is not to want it too much and
not
forget
to
about making helping the child want it.
exactly. Okay, so yeah, so you've got to have
But
both
yes,
a
you're right.
positive attitude.
A kid can't be a child bilingual because he's not in charge of himself until too late to be a child bilingual, right?
Exactly.
So to make the decision, then the child can make the choice. Do I want to speak to two languages or do I not want to speak to two languages? But if you haven't made the choice, it's like music. If you don't introduce them to music early, they can't be a child prodigy, right?
Absolutely. In fact, one of the examples that I would like to just cite is that you tackle refusal as a music lesson. Many children hate practicing, yeah, music or piano, for example, and insist on quitting piano as a teenager. So when they become teenagers, they want to quit. Okay, and then reproach their parents later for letting them quit. Okay, so a refusal, in theory, doesn't necessarily mean the end of a bilingual project. So do you believe, Professor Pearson, that you do have to insist a little bit?
Yes, but not then. When the child protests,
Yes.
you don't have an argument. You will
Okay.
lose that argument, right? You
Yes.
step back from the situation and you say,
Mhm.
what is the child not getting out of speaking the second language?
Okay.
What um, what satisfaction, what pleasure, what utility is the child not getting? And how can I create that sort of without without being too obvious about it?
Of course.
But it's not just teenagers. I mean, kids, I'm sure you'll know that
Absolutely.
in fact, the Fernandez, my first big project was with Sylvia Fernandez at the University of Miami with Kim Aller, who was my professor,
Mhm.
and this Pearson, Fernandez and Aller. When she had children, she had difficulty for two of the reasons, but one is that her mother-in-law disapproved.
I
That's
see.
it. But she lived in Miami, and she said it was easier in North Carolina than it was in Miami. But anyway, but the thing that I love what her child said is, "Mommy, don't talk to me like you're talking. Talk to me like I'm talking." So he didn't know the languages. He was like 4. He
I
didn't know the
see.
names of the languages, but he said, "Don't talk to me like you're talking. Talk to me like I'm talking."
That's funny.
And so she had to be more indirect. One of the things that she did later was
Mhm.
she had another baby and told the boys she only speaks Spanish.
That's exactly what I did with my youngest girl. That's exactly what I did. It says she only speaks and understands English. That's a technique that I used as well, and it worked, I must say.
I mean, they know it's not right, but they still go along. I mean, and the other thing that I say is talk to your dog in the language that you want.
Absolutely, absolutely. A pet, whatever. Oh, of course, absolutely, completely and utterly agree. Again, quoting your book, no single exchange turns the tide, but many small messages can build up a habit over time.
I said that. That was a good
Yes,
advice.
it's lovely. I think it's precious for many of the parents that reach out to me and they say, what can I do? And I says, it's not something that happens, that occurs overnight. It takes time, dedication, consistency. You've got to develop a daily routine. You've got to involve the child in positive ways in English. You've got to have fun and keep it, as you say, simple.
Well, so the other thing is, um, there's not one way to raise a
Hmm.
bilingual child. So the editor wanted to call it the ultimate guide. And I'm saying, no, I'm too humble for that, number one. But it's not like there's, if I came up with 2,000 situations, there'd be 2001 that I didn't cover.
Absolutely.
So I can't have the ultimate. The best thing I can do is give people the principles,
Hmm.
give them a lot of different examples, help them recognize in their own surroundings what resources they have that they're going to work with. So I mean, there are some places, there are some things where you just have to make do. You have to look for, you don't have the obvious one where you've got this family here and that family there, and you go both of them, just the kid sees both of them on a regular basis.
That would be amazing, but it's not possible all the
Doesn't
time.
usually happen, right?
No, it
Or
doesn't.
or if the parents are always, and that's the other thing, when the kid stops talking wants to stop talking the language. I think I have a story in there about, you say, okay, well, that's weird, but it makes me feel good, so I'm going to keep talking it. Okay.
Exactly. You carry
And,
on. You got to,
and you
yes.
can, so, and then the other thing that I find that I tell people more than I did, bilingual is good. It's very, very good. But sometimes there's other things that are more important. And in
Absolutely.
your life, we can't predict what it's going to be. So you just lay as much of a groundwork as you can. And if you can later, you'll come back to it.
Of course. Of
You don't
course.
miss, it's not static.
Hmm.
So just as you are building it and it could go away, it can go away and you can bring it back.
Can a non-native English speaker be an adequate model to raise a
Well,
bilingual English-speaking child?
not the only model.
Not the only model.
Okay. So okay, and then there are degrees of proficiency in
Of
the language.
course.
So there's the model of George Sanders. When I first read his book in the mid 80s, I thought he was crazy. He was an Australian who loved German, and he taught his kids German in a
By
very
playing all the time in German, I remember
way.
that
He
part.
also did, but more than playing, he actually had them do lessons. He taught
Had the
them to
two.
read in
Whoa.
German and tested them, and he was, but the kids thought it was fun. He was a sweet, wonderful fellow, and which you get when you read the book carefully.
Okay.
I did for getting ready for my book. Mostly, if your child starts with an accent, I
Hmm.
would say they will take on the accent of the neighborhood up till about age 7
Okay.
and not have an accent. And in fact, that's one of the reasons, that's one of the places where I see a
Hmm.
boundary. And so if the boundary is different for phonology, for how your sound make the sounds, for for how your grammar is organized. And foreign people and people who come from a foreign language, they typically keep their what they learned those terms to mean in their own language,
That's
and
right.
they're more likely to have, it's an accent that nobody, I mean, I worked very hard to discover who has an accent in their semantics
Okay.
about number. I mean, I would never notice it about someone unless they just sort of made one little mistake here or there. I thought,
Hmm.
oh, but it would just flow by because there's no 100% agreement about how things are said. The native speaker is kind of mythic. So, but
Okay.
let's get
This
back to
is
your question.
important.
They can, but they have to make the extra effort to make sure the child has other models
Hmm.
of the language. And I also think that, especially if they have the other, it's better for you if you're making the effort to learn the other language. What you're doing is you're valuing the other language. And
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
that's a bigger, more important lesson, in my opinion, than whether a word is said this way or that way, or whether there's a preposition here or there's not a preposition there. Um, I think it's more important to say, this is really important. And even though you can tell it's a struggle, it's a little bit of a struggle for me, I
Of
think
course.
it's worth it. And I think it's worth it for you to do it too. That's why I'm making this effort.
Of course. In raising a bilingual child, you talk about creating a bilingual environment by traveling, reading children's books, radio, television in English, and also possibly having native speakers whom they can consult or talk to. This is obviously another possibility, but these are uh, I think this is good advice for parents who want to raise bilingual children by creating a bilingual environment. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. But there again, there's a lot of ways to do it. But one of the things that I do advise parents when
Yeah.
when their child refuses about age 4, 5, 6, and is I say, who are you speaking that other language with? Speak that language in front of the child with someone else. So who are your sources of the second language, right?
Of course.
Of the minority language. So before you start working on the kids' environment, work on your own environment. First of all, you have more control over it.
Cool. Exactly.
And second of all, it will help to make that environment that the child is living in.
Maybe the most important advice for parents who would like to raise a bilingual child:
Is make it the child's desire.
make it the child's desire. Okay,
So,
but
and I think I use the term, we have advertising. Advertising can make you buy something you never thought you'd ever need, right?
yes,
Um, whatever they do, do it. And what they don't do is explain to you the virtues of their product, right?
I see. Okay, so you've
I
got
mean,
to.
if you look at old television and they
Mhm.
have these old commercials, they would actually stand there and tell you all the virtues of, this refrigerator
This
over
product,
that,
yes.
right? People don't buy because of that. Even car things, they don't, they they don't pick, when they're doing car advertisement and they're paying for all that TV time, they're not telling you about the carburation system that's better, right? Well, they have that information somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
What they're doing is they're making
An emotion.
perception,
Okay.
an emotional reaction, right, to the car. I really have to have that car. And I never understood, why do they always put sexy women on top of cars?
It
But
definitely creates an emotion.
it creates an emotion, it creates an identification. And it's like, oh,
And
I get that car, I'm going to have all these sexy women coming around.
I see. So you've
Because
got
it
to make
was
it,
the audience for buying cars. Now it's not so much. But
of course.
so they have them driving in wonderful places and skidding around.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
No, it's clear. You've got to make it fun, and you've got to link a positive emotion to second language acquisition.
right. Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
There's another very important thing. So
Yes.
parents would always say, well, he understands, but he doesn't speak it.
That's a very
So
common question.
he's going to start speaking it soon, right?
Mm-hmm. In theory.
Wrong. No,
Mm.
not in theory. Wrong. If he's understanding it, it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to speak it, because if he doesn't need to speak it, why would he speak it? Right? And so in Miami, for example, I would see all around me these what I call non-converging conversations where the parents are speaking Spanish and the kids answering in English,
In
and they
English.
go forever and ever and ever and ever. I mean, it's like that's the way they talk, right? So, and in fact, I would say make sure they're speaking first. It's more important for them to speak than understand.
Okay.
And the issue is, well, if you care about them speaking, I mean, it's fine. And it's certainly better for them to be a passive bilingual than not a bilingual at all,
At
you know?
all, yes.
And if that's the resources that you have right now, then I don't want to make anybody feel bad that that's what their child is doing. But if your goal as a parent is to have an active bilingual who can interact with other people,
Yes.
there has to be an expectation for that child that when he's spoken to in that language, she answers in that language. She has to be formulating something in that language. So that's a hugely big thing. And you asked about research since my book.
Yes.
There's there's been a lot of research on what's called, it's an ambiguous term because it's used differently, but I call it heritage language.
Okay.
There are called heritage language speakers. These are people, this sense of the term is not, oh, that's what my heritage is. I speak the language of my grandparents and so forth. That's one term, that's one meaning of heritage language.
Mm-hmm.
But it's come to mean, in at least in a certain circles in the US, it's come to mean someone who's exposed to a language and still doesn't learn it. So it's a kid who might have a good Spanish accent, but can't order a pizza
Okay.
in Spanish, right?
That's right.
And that's because it was never required of the child. It just went around him. It wasn't addressed to the child. It is now very well established that you have to have the child interacting. And then that's the
That's
same principle that's used for first language acquisition, which also didn't get a lot of attention. That's it.
exactly.
But you have to, you know, it's very hard for a child to speak contingently, to make his or her, like when you see two kids playing when they parallel play, they don't, they can't continue each other's conversations yet. They're
Mm-hmm.
too young to do that. And so we're scaffolding them to be able to continue somebody else's conversation. But you do that by continuing their conversation,
You
by
build
making
on it.
sure that you know. So you build on what the child is saying and what he or she is attending to. So that's a huge piece of helping the child come into the language, is to
Absolutely.
sort of drag the child from where he is, right? And that's the other thing, that wonderful Vygotsky thing,
Vygotsky, yes, yes,
yeah,
absolutely, yes.
he must
The
be very
zone of
important to Vygotsky.
proximal development.
Exactly. So you're always looking, okay, if I help him, he can get here. And I help him until she can do it by herself. And then I have to find the next thing to help.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
but you start where the child is.
You start with a child and slowly, gradually build on that.
Yeah, well, you just don't. And in fact, my my editor was from Slovenia,
Okay, yes.
and she she said in Europe people thought Americans were crazy because as soon as a kid is in your arms, you're talking to the kid, and then if the kid goes, blah, 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 you say, ah, blah, 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 yeah.
But it's actually a really good thing to do with kids. You know,
And
you are empowering them. You're giving them importance. You're making them feel
well,
important.
you're teaching them turn taking.
Also, yeah, absolutely.
So there's the mechanics of turn taking. And so they'll be attending to what you're saying, right? And if they don't attend to what you're saying, they won't be able to understand it.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
It was a wonderful experiment. This happened after my book. Okay, um, there was it just cemented something I knew, but it cemented it in a really good way. There
Mm-hmm.
was a young psychologist at the University of Massachusetts that I worked with, who worked on this narrowing, you know, perceptual narrowing. It's in hearing, it's in vision, it's in everything that we do, and it's learning to be in your environment, right? It's learning what
Okay.
your values. But what she did is she had an experiment. Cut me off if you have to.
No,
She had
no, no. I'm fine. It's
she would
amazing.
show the children 5 pictures of 5 different monkeys, and she would show them to them right side up, and she'd show them to them upside down. And at the beginning of the experiment, they had the same reaction to each of the pictures, whether it was
Mm-hmm.
upside down or right side up or sideways or anything. There was sort of, oh, there's an interesting picture, but there was no sort of recognition,
Okay.
right? As being different, right? So what she had was she had the parents, she made these 5 books, and she had 2 sets of these books. And it was 5 different, pretty distinct, a chimpanzee, a gorilla, different monkeys.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she gave them names like Boris, Natasha. And so she gave them names, John, right? And she gave the parents these little books with the 5 pictures, and there were 3 groups of parents. So one set would read with their between 6 and 9 months.
Okay. So very, very young. Mm-hmm.
And that's a time actually when kids are starting to recognize their own name, right?
Yep.
But between 6 and 9 months, she had them read at least 3 or 4 times a week for 10 minutes with the child to go through the book. Oh, look, that's Boris. You see Boris? Oh, there's Sally. Do you see Sally? And, get the kid to point and whatever.
Yeah.
The second group said, oh, look, there's a monkey.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, another monkey, right? And the third one was to go through and say, oh, look, oh, look,
Just oh look. Mm-hmm.
oh, look, and turn the pages and cuddle them and, have all the same stuff. And then at the end of the 3 months, she would test them. And she would test them by showing them the monkeys right side up and upside down. And if the child recognized the monkey, would have a different reaction when he was right side up than when he was upside down, right?
That's right.
Because the label was attached to him right side up. Right?
That's right.
So that label was so important that the children who had Boris, had the named monkeys, did much better at recognizing the monkeys, than that as different monkeys,
I see.
right? Than the ones that even had monkey, although those ones, monkey people, they did better than the ones that had just look. And you know who came and tried to and offered her money to do more experimentation was the
No.
military. Because when you go, well, I had a Japanese exchange student brother who lived in my house, right?
Yes.
My senior year of high school. And he came a few weeks beforehand, and we introduced him to some of our friends. And then he went to school, and he was in the sea of American kids. And we'd say, oh, was Bobby Van Voorst in your class? Was Joey in your class? And he just looked and said, everybody looks alike. Right? And when I look at a picture of Japanese people, they look pretty alike.
That's right.
Right? And so what they wanted a way to teach soldiers how to distinguish faces from another population.
Wow.
So even in the US, I mean, I think that would be a good thing to do for racial justice.
Absolutely.
Because some people don't distinguish some segregationists don't distinguish black faces one from another.
That's a good point. Absolutely.
Which brings me to my final point.
Yes.
The most important benefit, in my opinion, is, well, there's two, but I mean, it's nice they get cognitive benefits. It's nice they can communicate with more people. But what I like the best, that has been demonstrated by a woman that I just happened to meet while I was writing the book. And I put her study in the book. They're more tolerant of other people. They recognize that other people have valid ideas.
Absolutely.
They recognize other people. I mean, it's natural for you. I mean, we're programmed from evolution to be preferential, to treat our tribe preferentially.
Yeah, small groups.
Right. But we live in a global world, and we have these people who think that, we have people like my father-in-law, may he rest in peace, who think the only way you're going to get to heaven is if you accept his God, right? It doesn't matter whether you're Hindu or whatever. If you don't, you're never going to get to heaven because his God is the right God.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I think if you become a bilingual child, you have two gods at least. And it opens you up to the idea that there are other people whose ideas are just as good as yours. I think the other reason to be bilingual is because we can. I think that's the other good reason to do it. We can. And you live in the European Union. It's getting mandatory, right?
It's slowly they're getting there. They're trying to work on it. There's still a lot to be done. That's why my project is encouraging parents to start from home, because
Right.
unfortunately it's not possible in every small city or even bigger cities to have nursery schools or preschools that are bilingual, or that teach English or speak English. So it's definitely, I think, starting from home with a parent or parents speaking, playing, and establishing a daily routine in English is an amazing starting point.
Songs are great.
Pardon?
Songs are
great. Songs are great. Absolutely. I would just like to conclude again by referring to one of your sentences about raising a bilingual child. Start now. Now is better than later, and also better than never. So to any parent or anyone who is interested in raising a bilingual child or interested in bilingualism, this is definitely a book to have. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.